When Augustus died in 14 AD, he left behind something that had no name but was universally felt. For 40 years, he had cultivated a web of obligations, dignities, and dependencies so intricate it functioned like gravity. People stayed in orbit not because they were forced to, but because loyalty felt natural, even prestigious. He had fought his wars young, made his brutal choices young, and spent the rest of his life converting those victories into something more durable. He left this to Tiberius. Tiberius was competent, and the machine ran, not because of him, but despite him. He withdrew to Capri, let paranoia do the work. The borders held, tribute arrived. He was living off capital he had not deposited. Then came Nero. He arrived at power at 17, inheriting 40 years of Augustan prestige, still radiating through the institution. His first 5 years were good, not because Nero governed well, but because Burrus and Seneca governed on his behalf, and because the residual capital was still paying interest. Observers watching only outcomes would have called it a successful reign. What they could not see was what was being consumed. Nero killed his mother Agrippina in 59 AD, not merely a moral atrocity, a structural one. She was a living node in the network, a connector between dynastic legitimacy and the loyalty of the guard, the provinces, the old families. Her murder sent a signal to every ally who had calibrated their loyalty around the assumption that certain bonds were inviolable. They are not. Each began, privately, to recalculate. He then expelled Seneca, extorted provincial elites to fund his golden palace, and executed Corbulo, the greatest general of the age, telling every capable commander that excellence was a liability. Each act seemed to win. No revolt succeeded until 68 AD. Scoreboard: 14 years, emperor intact, empire intact. But by 68, the web was simply gone. Galba rose in Spain, and the Praetorian Guard, which existed to protect the emperor, let it happen. The civil war that followed was not caused by Nero's final months. It was the delayed structural consequence of 15 years of capital destruction arriving all at once at the surface. Every era produces three kinds of observers. The first watches only outcomes: wins, territory held, enemies neutralized. For them, the collapse was sudden, almost bad luck. They are watching the wrong clock. Power has a surface time and a deep time, and what happens at the surface can lag behind what is happening underneath by years, even decades. Nero's visible wins in 60 AD were being produced by decisions Augustus made in 20 BC. The second makes morality a causal force. Virtue wins, hubris destroys. There is something real in this. Loyalty and legitimacy do have a moral grammar, but the mystical version is precisely wrong. The universe was not correcting for Nero's crimes. People were. Governors defecting, guards calculating, allies revising. The moral is not a spirit moving through history. It is an aggregate of decisions by rational actors whose trust has been damaged. The mystical reading produces superstition. Perform the rituals of virtue, and the winds will follow. The structural reading is harder. Winds follow from the actual condition of your relationships, regardless of how you perform them. The third reading sees the mechanism. Call it power capital. the accumulated store of legitimate expectation a leader can draw upon, built through consistent behavior, honoring obligations, restraining force when restraint is possible, making defection more costly than loyalty, invisible while accumulating because it looks like nothing, patience, routine, ordinary governance, visible only when destroyed. The bully's paradox. A leader inherits strong capital and discovers he can push. Pushes a subordinate, the subordinate yields. Breaks an obligation, no consequence. Each experiment confirms force works, and he reads the payout as proof of his strength rather than withdrawal from a finite account. He concludes his predecessors were weak, too diplomatic. Directness, he believes, is more efficient than all that invisible maintenance. What he has done is three things at once. He has worn down the bonds holding the network together. Loyalty becomes calculated where it was once habitual. He has pressured subordinates into new alliances. When a patron becomes unreliable, the rational subordinate diversifies, and a subordinate with alternatives is a fundamentally different actor. And he has invited his vassals to revisit the value of vassalage itself, to recalculate whether deference remains safe and profitable. Once enough vassals are asking that question, the answer changes for all of them. He wins every visible engagement. Underneath, the network reorganizes itself against him. Seneca watched this from inside Nero's court. Genuine virtue works through the actual texture of relationships, not through appearances. The performance can be detected, and the network updates accordingly. Nero absorbed the style while leaving the substance. Forms of cultivation without the practice. Forms without substance are a withdrawal, not a deposit. Worse, every visible performance of virtue disconnected from actual behavior sends one precise signal. He knows the rules and considers himself exempt. That signal, more than any single atrocity, destroys legitimacy. The collapse looks sudden. It was never sudden. Those watching only the score called it betrayal, bad luck. Those believing in moral forces called it justice. Neither saw the decade of quiet recalculation, the thousand small updates running through the network, the generals and governors and client kings who had long since privately stopped believing. The work of building was always invisible. So was its undoing.